Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So really excited today. We've got Adeel with us. Adeel, I've actually known for quite some time. Going back, what about 7, 8 years, was
I
it?
think so. It's been about probably about 7, 8 years that we
Yeah, something like that.
met,
So
right?
yeah, first met back then. Didn't actually speak to you much until recently, despite that, but been following your journey massively, and obviously know that you've set up really successful squat practice. And so we kind of connected and had a great conversation a few weeks ago. And I thought it'd be great to have Adil on the podcast to share his experience. Adil's doing a lot of things, so set up a brilliant squat practice, got a lot of stuff going on within implant dentistry. I won't say too much though. I'll let you intro yourself, Adil.
Well, thank you, Bobby. Well, first thing, Bobby, thank you for inviting me on the podcast. It's a great honor. I think what you're doing with Squat Success and from our conversations before, how you're helping the delegates is something that I really resonate with. Similar to what we're doing in our, implant mentorings of just giving advice and just sort of teaching from the heart. That's all about my philosophy. I see a lot of synergy there. So it's amazing what you're doing. So thank you. Just a little intro about me. Obviously, I'm Adeel Ali. I qualified back in 2008. Been very fortunate to have great implant mentors in my life. So over the years, slowly increased my experience in implantology. Opened up a squat probably about 12 years ago. Exited that squat, and then I continued as a peripatetic implant surgeon. Then got into the acquisitions game just after COVID. And then we set up an implant-centric squat a couple of years ago. We opened the doors to that in November 22. Smilewell Dental with an attached lab to it as well. And then, over the past couple of years, we've had like a hockey stick growth on that. So I'm more than happy to talk about sort of that journey and how we did it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that, Adil. So I think the first question from my behalf is, I've actually had quite a few implant dentists. I think a couple of the last podcasts, and I always ask the same thing. What made you go from being, an implant dentist, traveling around, having that freedom, that lifestyle of doing what you want to do, getting to choose the patients you work on, to actually setting up a squat? What triggered that?
That's a great question. And to fund, I'll be very honest with you, to fund sort of lifestyle and enjoyment of lifestyle, probably sticking to being an implant traveling surgeon was probably the best thing to do. But what you have to start to understand is as you have children and you're thinking about how to give yourself sort of financial security, you need to think about building up an asset of some sort.
Yeah.
So one of my mentors always did tell me, he said, Adil, I think you're going to struggle with building a business because you're used to high cash flow from traveling, but then you've got to put a reset button on it when you start to build a business. So in my mind, I always wanted to prove him wrong. Okay, so that's why I did it. So I had to make the hard decision to say, right, we have to give up something to gain something else, right?
Yeah.
And not just only that, look, I mean, traveling around, it sounds very exciting, but what tends to happen is you're in a car traveling a lot. With that comes bad eating habits. The McDonald's chocolate milkshake, and the filet burgers and that sort of thing. So then it changes your behavior in what you eat. Then you start to get unhealthy. Then you're spending less time, more time on the road, less time with your family. So the trade-off isn't great. So my wife and I have made a big decision to say, let's open up a squat, and it's got to be close to home so I can get in and out. Obviously, I'll work hard on the business, but I can get to my family as quick as possible. Yeah, and also it has to be in an area where there's potential high multiples. Because if we're going into this, we have to think very strategically. I am building a business to exit one day. Okay. That's always the intention and still is. So I wanted to open up an area with a relatively high multiple. And that's why we picked Hertfordshire. So all these factors led us to opening up Smilewell Dental. We're in Bournemouth. And then what I also decided to do that if I go in hard, in opening up a squat, I want to sort of go in and go quite aggressive. So what we tend to find with a lot of squat, and you can probably chime in on this, Bobby, is that build it, keep the costs lean, build up the surgery time by time, fill the first surgery up, then maybe asset finance the second and third surgery. So I didn't want all that headache. I wanted to put in all the machinery from day one. We put in the lab from day one. We got all the asset finance for that because what I wanted to do, and I mentioned in the book as well, I wanted to invest high at the beginning so I can contract costs for my patients and make it affordable.
Yeah.
So when you control all the aspects of from manufacturing to delivery, then you can save costs. You can pass those costs to patients, so then you can recycle that, and you can grow your business. So within a short within 2 years, we've grown the staff to 19 staff members within 2 years,
Yeah, it's
and
incredible.
we're probably doing a revenue of about 3 million.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what we did.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. So I think the biggest thing I got from that was, the biggest reason to make that decision to go into the practice ownership journey was really for long-term wealth generation.
Absolutely,
So it's
absolutely.
not just a case of cash, any dentist can make cash, but it's how do I turn this into a long-term wealth strategy? Amongst there's loads of
And you
different
have
ways
to
to
make
do
those hard
that.
decisions. You
But
you have to make those hard decisions. Like you got to take, you're working essentially in a squat. You're not getting paid for it.
yeah,
So, I had to build it out for 2, 3 days a week. I'm not getting paid because the, as you know, the cash flow is tight initially, and then you're hiring people. You're going to ensure that all your employees and all the loans and the asset finance is paid off. So who has to take a hit? It's the principal, right? And then you've got to sort of cover all your expenses and all your taxes from the days that you're traveling as an implant surgeon. So at some point, you have to go through some adversity in your life if you want to build up long-term wealth. You
yeah,
know, you can either do it when you're young or you can do it when you're about. At some point in your life, you've got to take that hit.
yeah,
And I speak to a lot of implant surgeons, and taking that step is very, very difficult because they're just used to lifestyle. But what happens is you get used to lifestyle, then you get into your 50s, your mid 50s, and then you want to take a step back, but you haven't sowed the seeds 10, 15 years ago. Do you see what
yeah.
I mean?
Because you spent it all on your lifestyle rather than
On the
investing in
lifestyle,
doing
you
other
spend it
things.
on the
Yeah,
lifestyle.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. I mean, like I said, we've got a few implant guys who've been on the podcast prior to this, and it's really similar reasons. They say the exact same thing, which is fantastic. And the other thing I just want to touch upon quickly is, what you said about going aggressive. So this is actually something that I got wrong when I set the practice up. So, for me, when I set the practice up, there's a whole story behind that, but it was a very bad time for me. It was really, really horrific. A lot of expenses. My dad was really unwell in
totally.
hospital, nearly passed away, a few times, and I wasn't really in the right kind of mindset and frame to kind of rebuild the practice up at that time. But at the back of my head, it was always just, oh my God, there's this cost, there's that cost. Let's just, how can we get things cheapest? How can we keep it as lean as possible, not grow the team? I don't want to take another nurse. And coming 2 years later, it is exactly what you said. It's the complete opposite. I'm like, oh my God, like, how do we go as fast as possible, as aggressive as possible, and how do we just destroy this whole market and break the industry in the area? And it's like, I don't care, if we need more team members, get them, find them. Let's see who we can get, the best of the best, and let's just go. We're putting in plans to extend the building and putting more surgeries and marketing spend, etc. And it's just go because it comes back. We
Absolutely.
tested it, we did some runs, we know what our ROI is, and it's just a matter of capacity. As soon as we can fulfill that capacity, boom, we let it off.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it always comes back, I use very, very basic principles and when I'm making decisions, my wife, she's the spreadsheet lady and she'll do the accounts and finance and so forth. But for me as an entrepreneur, I've got a gut feeling about things. And I always use a very simple test, is what is the worst case scenario? Am I going to be on the streets and not be able to fend for my family? If
Yeah,
that's not the case, it's just like, you know what? I know I can generate it. I know how to grow. So I know how to communicate with people. I'm fast at implantology. I can I've got a lot of price elasticity because I control the whole workflow. And so you should feel confident in that to make big, strong, bold decisions. It's not
yeah,
a reckless decision to go aggressive. it's a calculated decision. And at some point, you have to just trust and have that confidence in yourself to say, you know what, I know this game, and I'm confident in my own skill set, and so why not? I think what kills off a lot of dentists in the career is just that constant procrastination. Is it the right thing? Is it the wrong thing? And we talked about it before we started the podcast, and just building that resilience. A big part of building resilience, I think, is doing a high volume of work as well, and
Yeah.
to be able to gross high fees as well. You know, because you get into the habit of doing a lot of production of work, dealing with a lot of complications, and again, that sort of internalizes that confidence.
Yeah, and it builds your communication skills to be able to deal with that, off the back end.
Absolutely.
If you're doing simple dentistry day in, day out, you're never going to build those skills and confidence in how to be able to do that, in the first place. And it's one of the things we were talking about earlier on, when you're setting up a squat practice, if you don't have that confidence, if you don't have that certain level of clinical skill set to be able to offer high value work in the first place, is not the right option for you. And there's nothing
Absolutely.
wrong with saying that. I say no to people all the time who want to join the course because it's just not right. I'm
Mm,
not going to take your money and say I'm going to promise you this, this, this. When actually you need to go and learn how to become a better dentist. You need to learn going how to be able to care for patients better, offer better treatments, and be able to earn more money before you can go down this journey. And I think that
absolutely.
doesn't get talked about enough, I think within dentistry. The other
I
thing we
mean,
talked about with that is
yeah.
obviously the mentorship that goes along with that.
Exactly. I mean, before we just touch on mentorship, there's another sort of rule I use. I talk to, I think relationship I talk about in the book as well. Sorry, I keep giving a plug for the book, but here it is. I think there's just so much wisdom in here. Okay, but I think a lot. A similar like I've got a lot of young dentists looking for mentorship, especially in implantology, and say like, should I be making this move? Should I be acquiring another chair or extending? Or for the first question I'll ask them, like, how's your relationship with your family, with in your marriage? And, unfortunately, some people are struggling in their marriages. And like, how are you going to make very, very big, strong, bold moves when your core team, i.e. your family, is not united? Because opening a business, I mean, it sounds all nice and sexy, but it's blooming hard work, right? And your spouse has to be, especially your spouse, has to be like your ride or die in this, right? So, before opening the squat, I talk to my wife and say, sometimes we don't know who, we lose ourselves sometimes. Who am I? What do I stand for? And so forth. So to get recalibrated, I'd talk to her and she'd say, Adil, you know who you are. You are this, you're an implant surgeon. You've built up your experience. You are a good, but, and just to get that confidence from your spouse, there's nothing like it to make big, strong, bold decisions,
Yeah,
you know,
I agree with that
yeah,
completely. Yeah, your family support network is huge.
massive.
If you don't have a family yet, don't neglect the fact that if you go down this journey, you can often find yourself not finding a family because you're so involved in the business.
Exactly.
If you know you want a family, then don't put that aside, for the fact of setting up
You
a
need to build
business.
it in tandem, right? You
You
can't,
have to
yeah.
build it in tandem. I set the squat practice. I had a one was 1 year old, the other one was 3 years old. Children wise, wife, and that support network was crucial.
Absolutely.
And I love it. We all grow together, we thrive
We
together.
grow together.
The
Yeah, the
kids
kids come to the
see,
practice. It's
yeah, the
nice.
kids come, they love it. Love seeing what daddy's
And
doing.
for me, like I don't want my kids having any. I don't want them looking up to anyone else apart from me. I don't want them to look at the latest footballer or YouTube star, where it's like, oh, okay, those are my parents. Those are my mum and dad. They did this. Wow.
Yeah.
Want them to look up to us, right? This is your mum and dad. This is how we built the business. This is how we employ people. This is how we grow their skill set. And them being in that environment is just not for wealth creation, but we're trying to teach our kids a lesson on how to build a business.
Yeah, and there's so much to that. I mean, that could be a whole podcast in itself around
Yeah.
parenting and what literally like, what rubs off in your children. But the main thing I think I was trying to get there is that if you don't have that already, you know, if you want that, don't do this for the sake of that. You know, it's important that you have to have a life, you have to maintain that. You know, times get hard, and it's actually harder if you don't have that. I think, you know, some people say it's easier because I haven't got a family, I can do this, I can do that, I'm free. But actually, but then, you know, when you've got a support network behind you and you've got
Nice.
more of a reason and a why to do it because you know, you're feeding your next generation and you've got to put food on the table. There's no bigger, stronger
No
why.
better motivation than
Yeah,
that.
there's no better motivation than that. And you're inspiring them, you're motivating them, you know, they're learning from you, and you know, you want them to be the best that they can be. You know, why would you not want that
You
in
need
your
some,
life?
you know what?
Yeah.
Having some sort of, not that we wish it on anyone, but having some sort of calamity or some sort of stress is good. It
Oh
keeps
yeah.
us sharp. It keeps us sharp. It keeps us on our toes. It keeps us, always looking for new innovations. When somebody becomes placid, and that's when problems can start happening.
Yeah, yeah. We have to have growth in our lives.
Absolutely.
You've always got to be looking for the growth. The people that are the most unhappiest are the people who are stagnant and not growing.
100%.
And you know they probably don't understand it themselves, you know, as to why. But you know, growth comes from, you know, education and learning and going out and doing uncomfortable things, and that's the biggest thing, you know, we're
100%.
talking about. So you know, we live in a comfort zone. Like for example, you know, place your first implant, it's uncomfortable. You know, I still remember
What
back in
achievement
the
it
day.
is.
Yeah, I still remember literally like Resh holding my hand like as the drill was going in, and my hands like this, like all over the place. And he's like, no, hold it straight like this.
Honestly, like, from my perspective, even for my mental health, I need to be winning, not in dentistry, just as a human being. Whether, okay, I've gone to the gym today, I've lifted some weights, or I've hit 10,000 steps a day, or I don't know, I've done a podcast with Bobby today. I've achieved something. I've been productive for the day. It's good for the mindset.
Yeah, yeah.
But I digress. But yeah, but we were talking about mentorship as well.
Yeah,
Um,
mentorship is key.
yeah.
So yeah, what we were talking about was, you know, like I said, for dentists who are thinking about setting up a practice,
Mm,
who don't have the clinical skill set. So one of the biggest things that I see, or biggest problems in dentistry, is a serious amount of lack of mentorship. So I was really fortunate to be in a practice, you know, where you came in, and we had a huge amount of mentorship from our principal at a young age. And I think, you know, hands down, I would not be where I am right now without that individual giving the guidance, the support, clinical, pushing us, teaching us, going on courses, bringing other people in to train us within the practice. And that was phenomenal. And, you know, I think it's a rare breed these days of how many
100%.
principals will go to that extent to build their team. But off the back of it, you know, he built a hugely successful business, which he exited from and, you know, did very, very well. And, you know, it's, you know, this day and age, though, I see that as becoming rarer and rarer, unfortunately.
Well, this is it's unfortunate in today's, day and age, where those traditional relationships aren't valued as they used to. But I would take mentorship a little bit further, with my mentor of 17 years. He's been like a second father to me. So I would, and his mentor was like a father to him as well. So it wouldn't just be about talking about clinical stuff. It's talking about you know, how he manages his family or how to deal with financial challenges with his own family. Like it's just amazing to have somebody like that in your corner. Because even sometimes even our own families or even our own parents have got a certain skill set, but they may not be able to sort of to guide us in our later years in life, right? Everybody's knowledge is capped.
Yeah.
So, just and especially with the guys I mentor as well, it's, I consider myself still being quite young. So I'm like an older brother to them, but because we've got that relationship, we can have very, very open conversations. Like I can be very frank with them. I can show them a lot of love. I can critique, and they can do the same with me as well. But it's about building that community.
Yeah. The
And
community.
that's a lost dying. So that's why, when I was talking to you, Bobby, what you're doing with your squat success, and you can genuinely, when from our conversation, I can genuinely see that you're not driven by, look, the finances and the the commission of what you're doing will come regardless, but there's a deeper meaning behind what you're doing. And that's what it's all about. Because that's who it's your credibility and who you're going to be known for. At the end of the day, our lives are short. I'm not talking about it very philosophically, but our lives are very short. And you could be proud on your deathbed and say, well, you know what, I helped a lot of guys to help their families. And I think there's nothing, I mean, that's a great mission to live for, right?
Yeah, 100%. I always tell the story, with Squat Success, it never started as a business. It started
Mhm.
by accident. It was just
Yeah.
people contacting me. And it got to a point where my wife was getting so pissed off at me speaking to
Yeah,
random
no,
people
yeah, yeah,
every single day in the evening. It was like, okay, I need to do something with it then and structure it appropriately. And
yeah.
then it led me down a pathway. And I was like, actually, hang on, I really enjoy this. I went through a huge amount of hardship when I was opening my practice, and I've got something back to give to these people that are going to go down the same path.
Yeah.
And I can hand on my heart say, over the last 18 months, I've easily saved between the group probably between 500,000 to £1 million worth of
Phenomenal.
mistakes that they were going to make,
Phenomenal.
with no issues, and I can prove that if people ask. And the people will say it for themselves, the delegates, through what we do and the support we give, the advice we give. Um, but it was never for the money. It was just for the fact of it's actually hugely fulfilling to actually come out of surgery and do something different and
Yeah,
give
yeah,
back
yeah,
to the
for sure.
community. And the biggest thing that I found is actually the community itself. That the way that ecosystem has built itself, the support that these guys and girls give each other is incredible. Like they have their own friendship network. Before they were lonely, they were alone. They were going down this pathway, not knowing what to do. And now they're in a system where they're connected to another 40, 50 people who are doing the same thing. And people that have
It's like
done it
when you treat a
for them.
patient, like when you treat people, when you put that smile on their face. I know it sounds a little cliche, but that's the real enjoyment.
Exactly that.
When the patient shows appreciation, right?
Yeah.
They say, "Oh, the dentist is making all this money." Well, the reality is, it gets sucked up in all these expenses in the practice. You only and then by the time you put it in your own pocket, it's gone to some other expense. So you don't really can enjoy the money, but the result that it gives and the appreciation, and I'm sure you're finding, I mean, for sure with my academy, that's what I'm finding with our guys. I mean, I remember, having a conversation with one of my mentees. And we went out for dinner, and he said, Adil, you don't like, well, we're having a laugh and a joke, but he said, Adil, I mean, you don't know how you've changed my life. I was like, stop pissing around. He said, no, you actually changed my life with my family. So I wanted to thank you. So, like just little things like that, it just makes you happy, man,
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
necessarily do volumes of people, but if we can just touch a few guys, and just give them some advice and just help them,
You can't put a price on that kind of stuff,
you can't,
Yeah,
man, you can't.
and that's why you say where it comes back down to doing things from the heart, that rather than doing things for money. But just moving on from that, then, a few of the people who are going to listen to this are really, really going to be interested in the squat itself. So,
Sure.
with the squat practice, just a couple of questions. So, number one is how did you do the research to kind of work out exactly where you wanted to set up your practice?
Yeah,
And then,
so that's quite interesting. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, no, answer that and then we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah. So look, I've done implants in central London. I've done it in very socially deprived areas as well. I've done all over the country in Norfolk, Northampton with yourself, Essex, everywhere. So I didn't, I needed the practice to work for me. So I've always got an assumption that implants are needed everywhere. It's just a lack of education that people don't know that they need implants, right?
Yeah.
So my default position is, look, wherever we build a practice, we're going to be able to get implant patients. So, and because I'm very confident in my skills and our value proposition is so different to everybody else's, I had to make the practice work for me. So I know you're probably looking for a technical answer, but I didn't do any of that. I said, look, this is where my family is. The only research I kind of did, look, it needs to be in Hertfordshire because it's got a good exit multiple, and I need about 2,500 square foot, and I need parking because I've got, we're going to be doing a lot of sedation, so people need to be able to park, and that's pretty much it, Bobby. To be honest with you,
Okay, no, that's fair enough. If that's what you did, that's what you did.
that's what I did.
No, no, because people ask me as well, and to be fair, even with Avenue, where we opened our practice, it was actually just more out of convenience. Yeah, at the time, it was a 10-minute walk away from my house, and we owned the building already, and there was huge scope to do a bit of commercial development with it. So it was a no-brainer, but it was opposite another dental practice. It
Yep.
was only after I opened the practice where I was a bit like, oh shit, there's actually a lot of dentists in Leamington, and I should have done a bit more research. And then that's what led me
Again,
down
with
the path of,
Smilewell, it's very different to a normal because it's a full
yeah,
arch driven. It's we're
yeah,
85%. We're
yeah,
85% implantology, right?
yeah,
So obviously I've got my referrals coming in, and then we had the lab where we're doing work for others. So that helped with the cash flow of the business. But when you're doing a full arch practice, people will travel in to come to the right surgeon or the right practice for it. So you've got a wider demographic.
So how did you go about building that patient base then within that practice? So all right, okay, we're going to open an implant only specific practice.
Yep.
We're going to specialize in full arches. We're
Yep.
competing now with Turkey. We're competing with very cheap clinics in London, who are marketing very, very heavily. And even we get that here in the Midlands. People
Yep.
coming to us saying, "Oh, well, they're going to do it for £5,000 cheaper. Why are we going to come to you for?"
Yep.
How do you compete with that? And how do
Well,
you?
from my mindset, the first thing is that I need to know in myself, can I compete? If it was a price game, can I compete with Turkey? Can I compete with very low prices? Yes, I can. Because, um,
Okay, so let me ask it a different way. Not so much compete, then how do you make yourselves stand apart from the crowd
yeah,
to
so yeah,
deliver,
I'll
to
answer
deliver
that.
the
So I
value?
think it's always good to know that, if if you're in war, your last grenade before you go out, yeah. So that's my last grenade, or my last bullet in my gun, right? If I need to play the price game, I can do it. At least that's in my back pocket, right?
Yeah,
But that's like our last resort. All right.
yeah,
So I think what you need, from how to compete with these things is that what you'll find is with a lot of these businesses, because look, people do price shop. They'll go to our competitors, and I'm sure, they do the same with us. They'll go and get treatment somewhere else. But when you're operating businesses, and this is what we've seen on, high volume, low margin, low cost, you need to treat your patients like a conveyor belt.
yeah,
To do your whole patient experience and give them the time, treat them like an individual, get to know them and their family, and do the low price game. I, I think it's impossible. You need to treat. So, especially when they're having a very, very invasive procedure, from my experience, when you have a little bit of branding and you've got some credibility, patients don't mind paying, £2,000 or £3,000 more, by having the right guys to do it.
yeah,
Yeah. How we started off the squat is, look, the reality is that obviously, I've got people refer cases to me, with implants. I've got a pretty decent name as an educator, and so forth. But that only goes only so far when you're opening up your own business, right? Because those leads are probably going to get dried up. So what you need to do is you need to think, how can I sort of scale this as quick as I can? But you can't, because you don't have the credibility. Like, the practice has no goodwill.
yeah,
So what we did was say, look, I've got to play that sort of very, very competitive cost just to get the patients, get something coming in,
yeah,
get the Google reviews up, and so within 18 months to 2 years, we can start putting up our prices. And that's what we essentially did. So we built up to, over 100 reviews over a couple of years. And, now we've got a reputation. Now we've got the stamp of authority to say, well, actually,
yeah,
this is our price. This is how we're different to our competitors. Um, and if we give our TCOs flexibility on the price. So look, if they really want the treatment with us, if they're very, very price conscious, we'll give them a bit of flexibility. But
Yeah.
We know that we can compete, but we don't want to, if that makes sense. We just go on cost. The biggest thing, we do sort of speak to our patients after they had surgery, is like, why did you come with us? They say it's the patient experience, man.
Yeah.
You made us feel comfortable. And it's the investment in small things that can have a big effect. I'm gonna tell you, we've got this coffee machine, cost us about nothing, about 500-600 quid.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's more profound than the surgical chair that you invest in, right?
You know what? Yeah,
Little thing.
it's
Little-
underestimated. You know, one of the biggest USPs that we have is the
Yeah.
fact that we don't have a reception. So we have a
Amazing.
locked door service. So people come, we're on a corner plot and it's beautiful off the end of main road, big bay windows, and people come into a lovely lounge and somebody has to meet and greet them and let them in. So one of the girls has to go out, offer them a cup of tea, coffee, drink, and they get to relax in there. And
Nice.
it's not like
Nice.
a dental practice
Do you
whatsoever.
not like high volume? You like low volume of patients, but bespoke
So we're
service?
we're we're lower volume of patients with higher value. So
Nice.
concentrating on implants, full mouth rehabs, cosmetic stuff.
And
We still do a bit of general, quite a bit of general, and we've got a big plan base as well.
well, that's so important, Bobby, because I think a lot of people that are going into business, they don't exactly know what their strategy is. I always knew that my model has to be an affordable model. So I
Yeah,
wanted high volume
yeah,
at affordable costs, and that's why I invested heavy at the
yeah,
outset, so I can drive that cost and make it more affordable. Does that make sense?
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Now, trying to if you're and speaking to a lot of guys that want to implement what I've done at Smilewell in their own business, but you haven't got the foundations to support that.
Yeah,
Do you see what
yeah.
I
No,
mean?
I agree with
You
that.
have to be very, and I'm sure you've talked about this with your delegates as well. You have to be very, very clear on your brand, what your USPs are, and how you're going to drive that.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier on. You know, for me, the research was in the area. You know, all of the practices in this area were marketing Invisalign, and it was a race to the bottom, and that's all you
Mhm.
would see on all the ads. And then we came along with a completely different angle around implant, sedation, smile makeovers, and other kind of stuff with different video content. And it was like, boom, like people haven't been exposed to this before. And there was a clear demand. But for us, it was clear that, you know, our demographic is 45, 50 plus. We want to be doing work on these people.
Yeah.
They need sedation, they need implants, they need a lot of restorative work, they need maintenance going forwards. They have a huge amount of periodontal disease. And it's like, how do we target that specific demographic and shift away from we just don't want to be another Invisalign provider because
Absolutely.
everybody else is they're already all fighting for that in the background. They're paying a huge amount of money on Google Ads, competing with each other on Facebook, Meta, and it's actually, well, let's just do the complete opposite to what everybody else is doing. And there's a huge
Absolutely.
market for it. And we know we have an aging population here because house prices are so significant in this particular area that young
Mm.
people can't buy homes here unless
Oh,
you're rich. It's insane. So it's like, well, actually, you know, we're onto a win-win here. And we
Amazing.
enjoy doing that type of dentistry anyway. So
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, why
Well, if you,
different?
yeah, I mean, I'm always having this conversation with, we do a little bit of Invisalign. We could do more, but I'm always looking at the sort of chair time as opposed to what you're sort of grossing and that sort of thing. And if you're not efficient, like if you compare it to fixed pros work,
Yeah,
you compare it to sedation and so forth from an hourly rate standpoint,
yeah,
is it as good? You need to be very, very efficient with.
it's nowhere near as profitable. So the only way it works, that whole business model is on a volume base. So
I mean,
if you're
yeah.
high providers, you know, fair enough, crack on. But if you're not, you get shafted.
You get shafted, and I think a lot of people that are, pushing a lot of Invisalign, yes, it's good for cash flow, but remember, you've got to pay the lab fees. Something, Invisalign, someone will give you 60, 90 days credit on it, and then your whole
Yeah,
plan
but I think there's a big
tied up.
misunderstanding between cash flow and profit.
Oh, it's totally,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's what they
Anything
say.
can look good on paper from an accounting
That is
standpoint, but
exactly.
that's not the truth. That's not true. The cash flow is cash flow management is absolutely essential. And that's why I had a conversation about 6 months ago with a guy. He wanted to open up a squat, and I said, how much do you have to hand? And I said, look, why don't you do this? Why don't you build up on your personal brand for a bit? Why don't you set? Because here, two brothers and a sister so four of them wanted to open a practice together. So look, you're a little bit low on cash. Why don't you build up that? You got a year, give it a year, build up your personal branding for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So it gives you more time to build up your cash reserves, and then do your squat, and then you got sufficient amount of cash to pump into marketing from day one. You know,
Yep.
why you don't want to, the thing is, it's about doing the right thing at the right time. You don't want to start a business where you're just totally on a shoestring budget as well.
Oh no,
You,
you can't.
you can't,
I always tell the story. For me personally, generally I want to hold minimum of 100K in the bank regardless, no matter
yeah,
what. Rainy day fund. So if I'm going to set up a squat, I'm going to set up a practice. I don't want to have to be worrying about overdrafts and whatever else it is. All right, fair enough. You can do it
dip
for
in and dip
that.
out. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you can do, with all that, that's fine. But if I know I've got that in the bank, I know
yeah,
I've got safety, I've got a buffer, and if I need to spend an extra 10 grand next month on marketing, wherever it is, I've got the funds there to do it, and I know I'm going to get a return on my investment anyway. So what
yeah.
does it matter? But without having that, the ones where I worry are where people come and say, I've got 20, 30, 40 grand in the bank.
No,
Can
it's
I
not.
open yeah, I want to open a squat. And it's like, well, number one, how much were you grossing to do that in the first place? Number two, with that, you're not going to be able to leverage what you can anyway. And even if you did make it work, if you can't really do high value work, it's not going to work anyway. So it's like
Yeah,
exactly like what you said, it's going back to working on personal branding. And literally at our first event, we had a whole talk about that because it's the one thing that dentists can do from day one, even if they're thinking about opening a practice 3, 4 years from now, not even today. The one thing you can do to help yourself is build your personal brand.
100%.
Use social media and leverage it because what I've seen in my community is some of the people that have used that effectively, like what we were talking about, Matt at Bank Dental, it's insane. He doesn't have to spend on marketing. He spent,
Fantastic.
7, 8 years building that personal brand, building that leverage, and now his audience comes to him, and he's opened
The,
up a squat and he doesn't have to pay a pound on marketing. Most practices are paying
he's done it at the
five,
right time. Yeah, he's
10
done it at
grand.
the right time.
Yeah, yeah, it's right timings. It's just a case of right timings. Build it up. Use what you got. Don't rush as well. You
Ignore the noise about what your colleagues are doing.
Exactly.
Everybody's different. Everybody's got to do different things in different, stages of their life.
Yeah.
And, I opened up, the second squat, you could call it, 17 years
I
ago.
think there's a huge piece around there around ego.
Yeah.
I get asked all the time, like Bobby, when you opening your next practice? And it's like, well, I don't really need to because I've still got capacity within this building,
Yeah.
and I've got other business interests as well outside of this. So it's like, people almost are asking for the sake of that. They've just assumed that you're going to because somebody else has. It's like, well, this person's already opened like two practices. Like, why haven't you? And you're
And
talking
what you're
about
doing here should have
about
no
it.
bearing on what somebody else should be doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's got different goals. Everybody's got, different set of circumstances. And, I think a lot of people get just getting sort of dragged into somebody else's vision, and that's when mistakes can happen as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you just have to do what's right for you.
Mhm.
But no, thank you, Adeel. We'll start wrapping it up now. So I just want to ask you one last question. What is your three biggest tips then for anybody who's going to be setting up a squat, this year, thinking about it? What would, through all your learnings and experience, what are the three biggest things of, advice that you can give?
Um, First thing is I would say, and we mentioned it on the podcast, be totally in if you're married, be in total in sync with your spouse and have a shared vision. I can't because you're going to need to relate back to that vision and where we're going because there's going to be so many points in your squat journey. You're going to have a lot of self-doubt, and you need each other in each other's corner to support to get you through it. It is grueling. It's grueling. Yeah. So if you haven't got that relationship, whoever with a family member, your spouse, work on that. Make sure that's super solid before you make you start going to and spending hundreds of thousands of pounds. That's the first thing. The second thing is um, build up on a very, very specialist set of skills. Um, Essentially, be a high grosser. Know how to gross high before you get into the squat game, because when the chips are down, it's going to come onto you to keep the cash flow up, to cover all the expenses. Yeah. So you have to be proficient in talking to patients, communication, being able to do comprehensive treatment plans and executing it to a high level. Okay. When you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I can do that, it's probably a good time to start a squat. And thirdly, one of the biggest things that led to such fast growth is consider giving some equity to people in operational management that are expert at that. That's what we did. So I'm a clinician. I enjoy the business, but actually managing when it comes down to compliance, operational management, HR, I don't do any of that. That's not my strong set, but we delegate that. And there's a lot of people out there, and again, I talk about it in my book, there's a lot of people out there that are absolutely dying for an opportunity to be given some equity in some sort of startup to secure their family, and they can bring a huge amount of skill set to your business. So that's something that you could consider, giving some equity for things that you don't really want to deal with, so you can focus on the most important thing, is how to drive revenue.
Yeah, no, that's actually I really love that third point.
Yeah.
The reason being is there's a huge amount of fear around giving away equity or giving away part of your business. But in reality, when you look at it, if you look at millionaires and billionaires, they don't own 100% of their businesses.
They don't. They don't,
They,
yeah.
they, they
Well,
don't.
look, I mean, look, I'm turning 40, right? So
Yeah,
realistically, I'm going to be going what, for another 15 years, max 20 years, 15, 20 years. How much of that 15, 20 years can I squeeze out?
yeah,
Now, I could drag my heels and trying to own 100% of one or two things, or I can get the right people and give them some equity and move on to something and grow something and develop something else. Do you see what I mean? For me to learn operational management and HR and compliance, one, I don't enjoy it. I enjoy implantology. I live and breathe that, right? And teaching and so why not just focus on what I'm good at and get other people that have got 15, 20 years of experience in that field and merge it together.
yeah, yeah.
And
No,
you sleep a lot better as well if you can I mean, efficiencies into place, and if you don't have to worry about what's coming into the bank account or what the revenue is, because you know it's on their back, right? To make sure that the expenses
and
are
they,
covered.
and they got sweat in the game,
They got
so
sweat in, they
so
got
it's
sweat in.
on it's on it's on them to perform.
It's on them to perform. And in the UK, life is getting very difficult. And so a lot of people are looking for opportunities like equity, like this, to give their families financial freedom. And again, like, it is a wonderful feeling, man, like to bring somebody on board and them showing you, that you've trusted them to do this. And it can be all contingent. You can say, obviously, I've gone into it very briefly, but there can be contingencies to protect your equity that you're giving away for sure, right? There needs to be KPIs and et cetera, put into place. But I just think, any venture I do moving forward, whether it's JV, everybody's got to have sweat in the game. Key people have to have sweat in the game for sure.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's a lot of food for thought, Adeel. I
My
think we
pleasure,
could
buddy.
probably carried on for a good few hours. Yeah, I think what we might have to do is maybe do a part two, just
I'd love to. I'd
delving
love
into a little bit deeper into the actual implant side of things and the practice.
to.
I think that would be fantastic. So if you're open for that, we
Of
can
course.
back on at some
Anytime.
point
Anytime, buddy.
and dive into a bit more of the detail with regards to the practice. But there was a huge amount of useful stuff in that, and I just want to say a massive, massive thank you, and I really
Thank
appreciate
you so
you
much.
giving
It's
your
been a
time.
pleasure spending time with you as always.
That's great. Thank you very much.